First of all, hello everyone. What I'm going to talk about is about the differences that are not that obvious when moving from classic games, like console games or PC games, to online games, and all the consequences that appear in the operations of the studio, in the organization of the studio, and how we approach solving some problems. Okay, let me start the presentation first. A word about our company. We are located here in Krakow, founded more than 10 years ago. We are about 60 people, still growing. And what we do are online games. And that's what really makes us special, I think, especially in Poland, when you mostly hear about companies that make games like The Witcher, for example. But there is a lot of difference in how we do things, in production cycle, in what happens after the release, and also in the way we approach our day-to-day operations. Our main business is social casino games, but we also do arcade games. If you go to our stand, you can see, for example, very nice pool game, which is quite big on Facebook right now. Our specialty are multiplayer games in general, because from casino games you can see games like poker, which are multiplayer by nature. Even if we do the games like slots, that are not multiplayer, we still put some elements of interaction between players into the games. It's something that we think is really important. And we are present on multiple platforms. We do games for the web, for the mobile platforms, and in the web we are present in both our own web portal, which is called gamedesire.com, the biggest logo in here, and on social networks. Of course, Facebook, but also many others, including Russian social networks like Kontakte. In addition to all that, you've got app stores. So this is the first difference actually, that we don't make the game just for PC or just for PS4 or whatever. We have to put it in every place that our user can be. So it's really important. And what's also very important about what we do is that it's more than just development. And I really have to stress it out. A big part of the company has nothing to do with development or with game development. And all of those are important. You can't ignore that when making online game. Community management is critical to success of any game. Same goes to marketing. Same goes to operations. You've got game that runs 24/7. So if it runs 24/7, even if you sleep, players somewhere on the other end of the world are playing it and are enjoying it. You have to make sure that it will continue to work all the time. So you have to have, for example, people who are on pager duty, who are able to react if something goes wrong with the servers. And how do you do it? That's something I'm going to touch later. What's very interesting, and it's a challenge also in online gaming, and it's also an opportunity, that the player is on the other end of the wire, and it's really, really cool thing, but you have to exploit it, because this is a very close relationship, and knowing exactly what player is doing is an enormous amount of value, but not using this value is just easy. Just you follow your intuition, you make a game, and you are happy. But using this value is very hard. You have to really think about how to get the value out of knowing what players are doing, and it will also affect how the company is run. It will affect how you educate people inside the company about solving specific problems. Because once you have the data, then you have to say, throw out your ego And intuition is very nice, but a lot of times you will simply know what players are doing, and you will be able to measure it very, very precisely. Okay, so I divided it into 4 pillars about how to make the service-based company working. And its development process, obviously, is the data, which I've already touched a bit. It's the technology part and the people part, which I'm going to talk about at the end of the presentation, but it's definitely not the least important. So let's start with the development process. In classical game industry, you've got very, very long production cycles, like 18 months, 2 years, sometimes longer, right? Sometimes we've had games that were made for 3 years or 5 years. They weren't even that long in development. Probably a game that does 5 years in development is a failure anyway from financial point of view, but you never know. And you get huge budgets, huge teams. That's not how we do it. We try to get the game out as quickly as possible. So, how many of you heard about the lean startup approach? There's an interesting book called exactly like that. The title is Lean Startup. It's by Eric Ries, and it's about the idea that we actually know nothing about our customer, and we have to learn as quickly as possible if what we are doing is correct. And online gaming gives us exactly that opportunity, because we can build very minimal product, put it out, see what people are doing with it, and check, did we make the right choices or not? And we don't have to invest $1 million or $2 million or $5 million in developing a game and then think it's a failure. We can invest maybe, say, 10 months into making some very minimal product, put it out, see how people react to it. It's very important being able to do it, and not doing it is very risky in my opinion. So the lean startup approach is something to really think about. Not putting resources into developing huge products when you don't have to. Of course, once you know that the game's going to work, that the assumptions that you made when greenlighting the product are correct, you can put a huge team behind the game. In our case, huge team is like 15 people. It's still not huge by the standards of large game development studios. And make them work on it for next 2 years or so. But you have to check your assumption. Is this product going to work or not at all? Because once you start just working on the product, you work on some assumptions. Basically, you know nothing. So it's very important. So there will be failures. It's unavoidable. Some products will fail. Some products will be hugely successful. And some products will be successful in the areas that you didn't expect. And our pool game is one such example. We did it with something completely different in mind, because we wanted it to cater to our existing players. We wanted to make a game that will be good, that will be just simply replacement for our old pool game, which was built in a technology that people no longer are using. It was using downloadable executables, and that's something that people no longer want to use. So we wanted to build a Flash version of it. And what happened? And that's really interesting, and something we didn't anticipate. Our existing players sort of caught up to the game, but they decided to stick to the old version that they liked. It's fine with us. But the game got huge on Facebook. It got huge on Facebook. And it's something that you can't really predict in advance. You can guess, maybe. But once we saw that the game is huge on Facebook, we decided, okay, so let's make a bit of a pivot and try to do something that's good for Facebook players. Maybe put more virality features into the game. That's actually something that the guys in the teams are doing all the time. Because we didn't wait so long for the release of the game, we were able to adjust the features that we were putting later into the game to cater better to our real user base, because that's what's important. And one thing that I will put from the technology point of view, I think is quite important, and it's hard to avoid, that developers have the tendency to build huge frameworks and future-proof the code, saying that we are going to need this in future. And I would say that 80% of the time it's not true. 80% of the time we're seeing simply dead code that will never be run. And there is no cure for that. I have to say it. The only cure for that is to have a team of developers who actually did it in the past and they know that they shouldn't do it anymore. But I still want to talk about it. It's important to have a seasoned developers in the team who really know that this kind of stuff happens, and usually building very general frameworks and very complex constructions in the code is not always the best idea. So something I already touched a bit, and the approach that I'm talking about is really just pretty much forcing it. That once we get to the release, it's really just a point of validation. Is the product going to work or not? And if it's going to work, then the team that's developing the game will probably grow. It will not shrink, it will grow. So if we compare it to the classic console industry, you got the gold version of the game that goes to the publisher, and that's it. You maybe are developing some patch, and generally the team downsizes, everyone gets laid off, in some studios at least. But it's not what happens in our case. In our case, the release is the point of the biggest pressure, and this pressure is only going to grow. We need to provide new content for players. We need to provide something that will make them come back, and we need to adjust to what they are really doing in the game. So it's important. I've talked about data, but I will talk about it more later. But actually analyzing what players are doing consumes a lot of our effort. And I think that going forward it will only take more time in terms of percentage of resources of the company. And that's a very important part. If the game is successful, it is not something that we'll be working on for 6 months or 18 months. We will work on this game for 5 years or 10 years. And it will be the same game. Maybe the team will change a bit. Some people will move to different projects, some people will move to different companies, there will be new people, but the game will continue to run. It's a service. So it's very important that we have to do whatever our players want. So the development process that we use, I already talked a bit about prototyping stage and pre-production, pre-release stage. Right now, we rarely use Scrum for that, but after we release, we actually think there is quite a bit of value in having some planning and good idea about where we are heading with the game. So Scrum is a good compromise between having some heavy project management methodology and the light framework that everyone can understand, because it's enough to communicate with the business people in the company, and it's enough for developers, and it's just about enough to have a good control over chaos, let's say, because we are planning as much as we need to. We have a place to gather ideas, to prioritize the ideas that we are making, And that's pretty much enough. We don't try to plan half a year ahead. It doesn't make sense for us. We will probably plan 3 or 4 sprints ahead, and that's it. The farther into the future we go, the less we actually know, and it's fine with us. We don't try to predict the future, really. And the entire idea about what we are doing is we have to be flexible. And the entire idea of agile software development is to be flexible, is to go together with our player, our customer. So this fits us pretty well. But as I said, it does not apply to prototyping stage. But when we talk about Scrum as a framework, that's something that I am personally pretty strict about, and a lot of people in our company are strict about it. So if we do it pretty much by the book. I've seen many companies that say, "Oh, we do Scrum, but we don't do something." It's not Scrum. Scrum guide is 17 pages, I think, and all that is present in the Scrum guide is there for a reason. And if you don't know exactly the reason why something is in the Scrum guide, it's a good experiment to do, by the way, to check some specific element of the framework and ask people in the company if they know why it's there. What's the reason? For example, what's the reason for daily stand-ups? And ask it to 5 people in the company. And that's probably an easy question. But before you try to modify any framework, you have to understand it 100%. And that's why we are strict about it. I think that introducing this kind of framework into any company requires a lot of work. It's a lot of continuous work, and it's something that pretty much never ending. So we do external training and coaching in our teams, especially for Scrum Masters and product owners. And going about 2 years into the past, when we started to use it, I think that right now my conclusion is that actually the biggest problem with introducing Scrum is not on the development side, it's on the business side and on the product development side. So the designers, the product owners, and the stakeholders are the people who really, really need to be educated the most. Because once you start work this way, you will suddenly see a lot of deficiencies in how the company operates, that, for example, there is not enough information present, that people who are able to provide information are not available to the developers, and that developers work blind, and they are sometimes not empowered to do the decisions, and the decisions they think they are empowered to do, they shouldn't be, and that there is a lot of communications problems that will need to be solved. So getting it right is very challenging, and it's an ongoing process. We didn't solve every problem we have yet. It's really quite a journey, I would say. We started to use Scrum about 2 years ago. I think we are about halfway to something really good. And I'm happy with what we have, but I really want to be clear about it. It's very, very hard to introduce it in any size of the company. I'd say that if the company is growing, if you happen to be in a company of, say, 20 people or 25 people and you know it's growing, then it's probably about time to start to introduce it. Not because you need it at 20 people, because at 20 people you have no trouble communicating. Everyone knows everything. You might not need that much planning, but just to get people accustomed to working this way, because you will probably not be able to maintain, I'm sure you will not be able to maintain as good communication when you hit 50 or 60 people, and you will, and then you will have trouble because introducing this when there is 50 people in a company or 60 people in a company is really a challenge. That's what we did, and it took us 2 years to get to something we are happy with. and it's still not done. So I said that our teams are not really that big. We are about 60 people, but 4 teams right now are developing games. Every team works on, well, ideally it would be if one team was working on one game. It's not really true for us. Everyone's resource constrained. We are no exception. Typically, we have team working on one game full time, maybe supporting some older game they did. Sometimes we split teams. Sometimes we transfer people between teams. That's normal. Obviously, it doesn't happen that much, but the case it's not ideal. From people point of view, the less multitasking they do, the better. But we have to live in a real world, and the company has tons of products and limited amount of developers. So game teams are pretty much independent of each other, and every game team has a product owner, which is co-located with the team. It's extremely important. And of course, dedicated Scrum Master, but Scrum Master is usually, in our case, I'm not saying it's the best solution, it's somebody from the other team. We could go the other way and have a full-time Scrum Master. We decided not to do it, and actually Scrum Masters are also developers. We might change it in future, I don't know. We're happy with what we are doing right now. And operations part, so it is 24/7, and servers that are running 24/7, and the releases and infrastructure. A lot of this goes to the teams. We have core technology teams, we have some small operations team, but if the game breaks, it's the people on the game team that gets woken up in the night. They are the first line of defense. So it's really important. I consider it extremely important, this approach. You build it, you run it. If you make an error in the server code or in the client code and release it to the players, you are the one to blame. You are the one who makes a decision if it's good enough to be released. And what's important that in Scrum, technically, what's being said is you have shippable product increment every sprint. In our case, it's every 2 weeks. Most teams decide to release more often, simply because it reduces the risks related with big releases. And it's fine. It's their decision when they are making the release. They have full control over the release process. It's fully automated. I will talk a bit about that in a moment. So, of course, there is some technology that's shared, and we use Git for source control. It's pretty standard. We use a clone of GitHub. We don't use GitHub. We host our source code internally, but the development model closely resembles GitHub. So we've got the modules that we are sharing across the company, and the granularity of those modules depends on the specific area of the technology, but in general, it is possible for someone from one team to modify other teams' code. But there is something that we are making all the time, which is called code review. So you can't just change something and, well, technically you are able to do it, but you can't just change something and say, well, I changed it and release it to production. Typically, whatever change you make has to go through other programmer. So, data part. And analytics. It's a huge issue. Maybe not an issue, it's a big, it's a bad word. But data analytics and what we do with it is, in my opinion, the biggest source of competitive advantage that online gaming companies and internet companies have right now. But making use of the data, getting value of the data requires different thinking. And that's why I say it's more about process than tools. Because once you know what you need, once you are able to ask the right questions, once you are able to say what kind of questions appear in a repeated manner, something that's a problem that maybe requires automation, then you will find the tools for that. Don't think about building the tools or buying the tools before you know what you really need. And what I would everyone encourage if you are making an online game is to collect as much data as you can. That's easy to do. That's cheap to do. And because it's so cheap, you don't have to worry that much about analyzing it later. Maybe you will need it, maybe not. Maybe a year from now you will decide to throw it away. But it will probably cost you just a few $100s or a few $1,000s in a year to get all the data from your game. Unless it's successful, and if it's very successful, then you won't be bothered with this cost anyway. But once you start to analyze the data, it will require an investment. And it's an investment in databases, in data analysis clusters, solutions like Hadoop, Storm, whatever, maybe some custom-built solutions, the developers, data analysts, data scientists. So it is going to be expensive, but looking forward, I think that if we look at our company 2 years from now, I would say that 20% of our company is going to be data analysts, or 25%. It's a guess. It's a guess. I don't know that for sure, but just looking at the direction we are going, the biggest investments we are making, the biggest challenges we are facing, that's in analyzing the data. And advice to small companies that still want to really get the benefit of being close to the player and having player on the other end of the wire. This last point, the third-party tools are getting better. Use them. We are using third-party tools anyway, because we don't want to have everything built by ourselves. Something I already talked about a bit is that when we are developing products or just managing products, I use the word product here, but really it's a service, as I said. We can be more scientific, and it's important to do it, because if you have the data, you can sometimes simply say, well, we don't have to guess. We can just check what players are doing right now, or what they did in the past week. And this, what in normal game design would be an assumption, is no longer an assumption. You can make experiments, or you can put extra instrumentation into the game to gather the data, to provide you answers to the questions that you didn't know you have. It's pretty normal. Sometimes you will have to guess, and that's a topic I find quite interesting, because many people say that data analytics will kill the game design. It's not true. It's completely not true, because great designers are going to be of value all the time. But the greatest designers, I think, know that they can make a mistake, and this is where data can help them. And I think that the best designers really see the data as a help, not as something that will step on their ego, that they are not making the right thing. They will simply say, okay, I think it's going to work, and we have no data to prove it, but let's try it. And it's a good approach. It's a good approach. But it can be validated afterwards. Was I right? Was I not right? Okay, everyone makes mistakes. We are all human. So we can do what scientists do. We do experiments all the time. Something also quite important, especially once you have more games in the company, so it might not apply that to smaller companies, but even in case of one product, it's important, is the information flow. So once you have the data, once you analyze the data, you have to make sure that what you do with the data is reaching the right people. So whatever conclusions you come to, those conclusions have to come to the people who actually are making to do something about it. And of course, what we do is define some very standard KPIs. They are available within 24 hours, but we also give people the direct access to the raw data that they gather. And they write their own tools to analyze the data. It's standard thing for them to write their own tools. And sometimes those tools can be used in other projects, sometimes not. But we can't predict really what the people on the game team are going to need. So this flow of information is definitely something to work on. It's not enough to have data analysts locked in a room. What if they don't talk to other people in the company? So what we are thinking about right now, for example, is to embed the data analysts directly into the game teams. I know of companies that in that industry that do exactly that. They don't have data analysts as a team, maybe as a horizontal team, just people in the same specialty, but they put them inside the game teams so that the information reaches the right people and it reaches them quickly, so they are able to react quickly. We've got a lot of shared technology. It's a bit of an advantage we have over companies that don't exist in this industry right now. So if you want to enter online gaming industry, you will probably have to solve quite a bit of standard problems, I would call them. Maybe not very standard, but occurring in every company that does it. It's things like scalability, availability, pretty common to any internet company. Infrastructure monitoring, and we built a lot of shared technology. And what's interesting about it is that we are able to move a lot of know-how from one project to another. When starting a new project, we start with existing tools, we start with existing build processes, we can modify them a bit, and they evolve all the time across the company. What's important for us to be able to start a project quickly, be able to iterate quickly on it, but still don't sacrifice the concerns that are typical to operating at large scale. So we are able to provide analytics and standard KPIs on day one on any product. We are able to get pretty good scalability. It depends a bit on developers because it's not completely open to developers. It's impossible to make it completely open. Automated builds deployment is really important. Standard thing for us is continuous integration. I was wondering if I should put this slide in a presentation, but I think it's probably one of the most important automation tools that you can use to be able to have repeatable automated build that everyone can trigger. We use it for both local environment and for production. Still, releasing them to production in our case is a manual process. We don't use it completely in a completely automated way. So once we merge to the master branch in a source control, we just prepare the release, and someone on the game team can click to activate it. Right now, our new games are hosted in Amazon Web Services. It's pretty standard. I've seen a lot of discussions about it, but we are using a lot of added services from Amazon, which really allow us to automate it. And if we look at the total cost of running a business, running infrastructure, it's probably about the same as in case of running your own infrastructure, but the difference is that we do it with less people. So as a company, we are more focused on making games, which I think is our core business. So I'm not saying we will not move out of Amazon. And production environment, what's really important is that releases are quick and rollbacks are even quicker. So very important thing to consider is that many teams have this fear of release. of releasing something to customers, of showing it to customers. Okay, if it doesn't work, it just takes less than 1 minute to go to the previous version, to everyone. It's not always that simple, and there are sometimes technical issues with that. For example, if you are migrating the database schema or doing something non-standard, but typically you are able to release very quickly and roll back very quickly if something goes wrong. So this was our goal when automating releases, to make people release more often. There is a limit to that, of course, so we are happy with what we have. One more thing about technology is that we are on multiple kind of platforms, and the choice that we made some time ago was to use Adobe Air on mobile devices and to use Flash on the desktop. Obviously, people say that Flash is going to die, and it's been dying for 2 years at least, and still can't. But we are exploring new technologies, of course, and I think that one day we will move to something else. Right now we are using Adobe Air, and we are quite happy with it. You can see at our stands the slot games that's been done with Adobe Air, running on both Android and an iPad, and see how it works. Software quality is something not to be ignored, but don't get religious about it. I've seen many people who say, we have to use all the engineering practices, the code review, all the static analysis tools that we can, and so on and so on and so on. Well, it might make sense, but it will slow you down a lot. So the good idea is to be pragmatic about it. The goal is to provide maximum value to our players, and sometimes we can make mistakes. It happens. If we make a huge mistake, we will roll back. If it's a small mistake, we will just correct it and release a new version. But quality is something that cannot be ignored in an online game. Really, if something breaks once in a million sessions, it will break. Okay, the last part of the presentation. Really important thing about online games and what we do as a company is the human factor. As I said, the successful games will last for many years, and it's important that people are prepared for it, that people want to work with the company and with maybe one game for many years. It's really defining many things that we can and cannot do as a company. So there is no crunch, no way. There's simply no way for us to crunch. It's impossible. Sometimes people will stay after hours. They will come to work on Saturday, of course. But even then, they either get paid overtime or they take the time off later. It's impossible to work like in the long run if you have to crunch. We want people to be happy, and it's really important for them to be happy. After 2 years of working with say poker game or bingo game, they are still happy and they enjoy coming to work. It's important. People who are happy are more productive. So it's important that people are working as a team, that they are cooperating, that they are sharing their knowledge. And in any industry where people work with their heads, a lot of knowledge stays in person's head. It doesn't matter how much documentation they will write. When they leave the company, you lose some of it. So it's important to keep the people, and it's important that people are able to work together, and that the teams are really working as a team, because team is more than just some of the people who work on the team. Something that's a bit of a problem is if you kill a product, because people get attached to the product they're working on. They think the game is their child, they get emotional about it. I know at least of one company that hires a psychologist to talk to the people when they kill product. We're not there yet, but you have to be careful. You have to be careful, even when shifting focus from one product to another. people have feelings and they are not resources. So when someone works on something for, say, 6 months and really gets invested into it, sometimes people just think about it after they finish the working, and they come with new ideas every day and work on it. And they hear, okay, we have to do something else. We are not working on it anymore. Well, it's obvious that they are going to feel bad about it. So it's a concern, and I think it's something not easy to solve in general. One more thing is, of course, hiring. Technical competence is required, that's obvious. But what I've seen happening more and more in our company is that actually technical competence is just the very basic thing that we require for people. We look at more and more at different things. Why? Because people have to work in teams. People have to work together. People have to be able to provide more value than just sit down and write code. It's not their job. Well, it is their job, but it's not their only job. Because you can't be just a programmer. Working in a small team means you are a bit of a programmer, a bit of a product manager, a bit of a designer. Of course, you might have a dedicated product owner, but product owner doesn't work on himself or on herself. It will need a help from the team. It will need a guidance from the team in case that this person is doing something that maybe not perfect. And those people have to be able to speak up. Those people have to be able to speak in a way that's not offending anyone in the team, and they have to not be afraid of speaking. They have to know that if they have a good idea, they will be heard. So we look more and more at things that are not technical. Okay, I think we're running out of time,
yes,
right?
We are out of exactly.
Okay, I'll tell one thing that's not on slides, because that's the last slide right now. But it's a thought that's it's also important. If you have, say, let's call them bad apples in your company, people who are contagious, toxic, and spread bad word and have a detrimental influence on the teams, it doesn't matter how good they are. Get rid of those people, really, because it will hurt you in the long run. Okay, we are hiring. Of course, if you're interested in our company, there is a stand in the expo hall. You can talk to us, you can talk to me later. I hope to be at the after party later today. So I'll be happy to chat with anyone. And well, that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for this presentation, for our speaker.